No one expected the power to flicker across the sky that night, but when it did, it felt like the whole town paused. And in that pause, she heard a knock she hadn't heard in years, soft, familiar, and impossibly out of place. Maureen froze near the window, her breath catching before she even understood why. It had been so long since she had seen Kylan, long enough that she had convinced herself he had moved on, forgotten the small details they once shared, and built a life far from the tiny lakeside town where everything between them had quietly fallen apart. But that knock? She remembered it. 2 short taps. A pause. 1 more tap. The rhythm he used back when they were barely more than kids, slipping notes under each other's doors during late autumn storms. Maureen steadied her breath, brushed her fingers through her hair, and opened the door. Kylan stood there under the faint porch light, looking both older and somehow exactly the same. His dark jacket was speckled with rain, and he held something in his hands, something she couldn't quite see through the dim glow. But his eyes, they held the same steady warmth she used to fall into without realizing. He offered a sheepish smile. "Hey, Maureen." Her heart startled at the sound of her own name, spoken in that tone only he had ever used. She stepped aside automatically and let him in, even though her mind was racing with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. He walked to the center of her small living room and glanced around with a quiet tenderness. "You kept the place almost the same," he said softly, as if he remembered every corner. She didn't know whether to laugh or tense up. "I guess I did." Only then did she notice what he held in his hands, a small, worn notebook wrapped in a faded ribbon. It looked familiar, but the connection wouldn't quite surface. "Why are you here, Kaylin?" she asked gently, folding her arms, though not out of anger, out of self-protection. His gaze landed on her with a weight she felt in her chest. "Do you remember the night we watched the meteor trail from the boathouse deck?" he asked. Marian blanked. She hadn't thought about that night in years. The air had been cold, the lake restless, and the stars streaking like they were trying to outrun something. She remembered sitting shoulder to shoulder with him, talking about their wild, impossible futures. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course I remember." "You told me something that night," he said, "and I don't think you realized it mattered." Marian frowned. "What did I say?" He lifted the small notebook slightly. "This belongs to you." She took it cautiously, untying the ribbon. When the cover flipped open, her breath tangled. The handwriting inside was hers, but younger, softer, hopeful. It was the dream journal she kept in her late teens, the one she thought she lost. "How?" Her voice trembled. "I thought this disappeared." "When your family moved, it got mixed with some of my things," Kaylin said. "I found it again a few days ago, and when I flipped through it, I remembered what you told me that night. You said you were afraid that the world would forget you if you didn't write things down, that you needed proof your memories mattered." A single tear rose uninvited at the back of Maureen's eyes. She shut the journal gently. "I can't believe you remembered that." He stepped closer, but only slightly, respecting the invisible space she kept around her. "Of course I remembered. You said it with such fear in your voice. I never forgot." The room grew painfully still. Part of her wanted to tell him she wasn't that girl anymore, the one who feared vanishing, but another part, the quieter part, knew she had never fully outgrown that fear. "Why bring it back now?" she asked softly. Kaylin exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck in that old nervous gesture she used to tease him about. "Because there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said a long time ago." Her pulse fluttered. She hadn't expected this kind of conversation, not tonight, not after all the distance and silence. "What is it?" she whispered. Kaylin hesitated, eyes lowering for a moment, as if gathering courage that had taken years to build. When he finally looked at her again, there was something in his expression she couldn't decipher, something deep, fragile, and close to unraveling. "Maureen, there's a reason I never forgot." The air shifted. Her breath caught. Her world leaned forward. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. And just when she thought he might finally reveal the truth he'd carried all these years, another knock sounded at the door, sharper, unexpected, and nothing like his familiar rhythm. Maureen stared at Kaylin, heart pounding. Who on earth was knocking now? The second knock cut through the room like a sudden drop in temperature. It wasn't loud, but it carried an urgency that didn't match the gentle stillness between Maureen and Kaylin. She exchanged a glance with him, her heartbeat rising in a way she couldn't quite explain. "I'm not expecting anyone," she murmured. Kaylin nodded slowly, but the tension around his shoulders tightened. He stepped back, giving her space, though his eyes never left the door. For a heartbeat, she wondered if he feared the visitor or if he feared the moment breaking again. Maureen walked toward the door with careful steps, barely breathing as she reached for the knob. The porch light flickered softly as she pulled the door open. No one stood there. Just the dark stretch of her quiet street, washed in the faint glow of distant lamps. The rain had slowed to a light mist, drifting like a thin veil across the pavement. But something rested on the welcome mat. A small envelope, cream-colored, no name, no stamp. Just a faint mark in the corner, a tiny ink star. Maureen shivered. That symbol was familiar too, but for a completely different reason. She leaned down, picked it up, and held it tightly before closing the door. Kaylin watched her carefully as she returned to the living room, his brows drawing together. "Do you want to open it?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. The envelope felt light, almost weightless, as if whatever was inside carried more meaning than mass. She tore the seal gently and slid out a single slip of paper. Her breath caught. "It's a drawing," she whispered. Kaylin stepped closer, but still kept a respectful distance beside her. The image on the small paper was simple but striking, a perfectly sketched view of the old boathouse where they used to spend time. It looked almost exactly as it had years ago, with the crooked railing and the lantern that never fully worked. But there was more. A message written beneath it in soft pencil. "Do you still remember what you wished for that night?" Maureen felt her stomach twist. Someone else knew about that night? About her wish? She looked up at Kaylin, searching his expression. "Did you leave this?" His eyes widened instantly. "No, I wouldn't knock and run off like that, and I definitely wouldn't send something without saying so." She believed him, instinctively, fully, and that scared her even more. "Who else would know about that moment?" he asked gently. Maureen shook her head. "Just you. And even then, I barely told you the details." "That's why I'm confused," he admitted. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the message again. It felt like a memory reaching out from the past, tugging at her fear of being forgotten, of her life slipping into silence unless someone cared enough to remember. Kaylin stepped closer, his voice low. "We don't have to figure it out tonight, but can I stay for a few minutes? There's something I need to say before I lose my nerve again." She exhaled slowly and nodded. "Yes, please stay." They sat on opposite ends of the couch, with a gentle space between them, though the emotional distance felt far smaller. Kaylin rested his hands on his knees, as if grounding himself. "When I found your journal," he began softly, "I didn't just remember what you said that night. I remembered how afraid you were to hope for anything. You thought dreams were fragile, easily forgotten. But the thing is, yours weren't." Marian's chest tightened. Kaylin, he shook his head lightly. Let me finish. I kept a lot of things to myself back then. Too many. And I know I left without giving you the closure you deserved. That's on me. But I didn't forget you, Marian. Not your laugh, not your stories, and not the wish you made that night. Her fingers curled around the envelope again. What wish do you think I made? He looked at her with a tenderness that unraveled something deep inside her. That you wouldn't have to face the world alone. Her breath faltered. I never said that out loud. You didn't have to, he replied softly. You said everything in the way you looked at the water that night. The room held a quiet warmth, one that made her heart ache in ways she hadn't expected when she opened her door earlier. She wasn't sure what frightened her more, the old feelings resurfacing, or the mysterious drawing that seemed to know exactly which memories to stir. Before she could respond, a distant rumble echoed outside. Not thunder, something heavier, like a vehicle slowing near her house. Marian turned toward the window, unease raising the tiny hairs on her arms. Kaylin leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Marian, do you see that? A pair of soft headlights glowed through the mist, stopping right in front of her home. The headlights lingered outside Marian's house like a held breath, unmoving, quiet, and strangely deliberate. The mist softened the beams, turning them into pale halos against the night. She felt Kaylin shift beside her, the couch creaking under the weight of his caution. That car wasn't here earlier, he murmured. Marian nodded slowly. She wasn't sure why, but a familiar chill slid down her spine. She set the drawing on the coffee table, as if keeping everything in plain view might help her make sense of the growing unease. Maybe it's just someone turning around, she whispered, though the words sounded hollow even to her. But the vehicle didn't move. It stayed parked directly in front of her home, engine humming low like a soft growl beneath the night. Kaylin leaned in slightly, his voice gentle. Do you want me to check? I can step out and see if someone needs help. Marian grabbed his sleeve before she even realized she was doing it. No, just wait. Let's see if they leave. He paused, then nodded, settling back with slow breaths. The porch light flickered again, something it hadn't done in months, and though it could easily be the weather, it deepened the sense that the night was building towards something neither of them expected. Marian stood and moved quietly toward the window, pulling the curtain just enough to peek through. She saw a figure in the driver's seat, silhouette faint but undeniably there, someone sitting still, watching. I don't recognize the car, she said softly. Kaylin rose, joining her but keeping a step behind. Do you recognize the person? She swallowed. No, they're not moving. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain thinning into a faint patter on the roof. Then, as quietly as it had appeared, the vehicle eased forward, slow at first, then steadily down the street, fading into the mist until it disappeared completely. Marian let out a shaky breath. That was strange. Kaylin nodded, but his eyes drifted to the envelope on the coffee table. Everything tonight has been strange. She walked back to the couch, sinking into the cushions with careful steps. Do you think the envelope and the car are connected? I don't know, he admitted, but the timing is too sharp to ignore. Maureen rubbed her palms together, trying to steady herself. The drawing felt like a whisper from the past, reaching into the present with an eerie precision. But the car felt like something else, something watching rather than remembering. Kaylin sat beside her again, closer this time, though he didn't touch her. Maureen, I need to finish what I was trying to tell you earlier, not because of the car, but because I came here for a reason. She turned toward him slowly. I'm listening. His breath deepened, steady but full of unspoken weight. When I left town, everyone assumed it was because I wanted bigger things, a busier life, more opportunities, and I let people think that. But the truth is, I left because I thought I wasn't good for you." Her brows lifted, confusion soft and sudden. "Kaylin, why would you ever think that?" He looked down at his hands, fingers interlaced. "You had dreams that were brighter than anything I'd ever imagined for myself. I didn't want to be the reason you stayed in a small place instead of going after everything you deserved. So I convinced myself that stepping back was the kindest thing I could do." Marine's voice softened. "But you didn't tell me. I was young and scared, and I thought disappearing quietly would hurt less than a goodbye." A gentle ache bloomed in her chest. She remembered those long days after he left, how she had kept waiting for a letter or a single explanation, until she finally forced herself to stop hoping. But seeing him now, hearing this, it made old questions unravel in new light. "Kaylin," she whispered, "you weren't the reason I stayed. You were the reason I felt brave enough to dream at all." He lifted his gaze, the weight in his eyes shifting into something fragile. "I never knew you felt that way." "I never said it," she admitted. "I thought it would make things harder for both of us." They held each other's gaze, silence thick but warm, the kind that made her feel like they were standing on the edge of something neither of them had the courage to name. Then Kaylin exhaled and glanced toward the journal she had placed on the table earlier. "There's something else I remembered, something from one of the notes you wrote yourself." Marian frowned softly. "Which one?" He tapped the journal's worn cover. "The entry where you wrote about the wish you made, the night of the meteor trail. You thought no one would ever care enough to remember the small things about you, your fears, your hopes, your random little stories." Her breath went still. "And you remembered?" she whispered. "I remembered everything," he said with quiet certainty, "even the things I wasn't supposed to." A soft tremor passed through her chest, part fear, part longing, part something she wasn't ready to name. But before she could respond, a faint sound echoed outside. The same car engine, closer this time. It had returned, and this time it stopped right at her driveway. The engine settled in her driveway with a low, steady hum that felt far too intentional. Marine's breath caught as she looked toward the window again, her pulse climbing with each passing second. Kaylin stood slowly, every movement deliberate, as if he didn't want to startle the moment. "Whoever it is," he whispered, "they came back for a reason." Marine nodded, though her throat felt tight. "I don't understand any of this." Kaylin took a step closer to the window, then paused and looked at her first, silently asking permission. She gave a small nod. He parted the curtain just enough to see outside. The same car, the same pale headlights cutting through the mist, still parked, still unmoving. But this time, the driver's door was open. Marine pressed a hand over her heart. "Is someone out there?" Kaylin leaned closer, eyes narrowing as he searched the shadows. Someone stepped out. They're not close to the porch, but they're near the end of the driveway, standing still. "Are they looking at the house?" "I think so," he murmured. The idea of a silent stranger watching her home sent a chill rushing through her. She wasn't afraid of the night itself, but the unknown threaded through it unsettled something deep in her chest. Kaylin stepped away from the window and walked back to her, lowering his voice. "I won't let anything happen, but maybe we should stay inside and keep the doors locked." She exhaled shakily. "Kaylin, do you think this has anything to do with the envelope?" "I'm not ruling it out." He glanced at the small drawing again. "But someone clearly wanted to remind you of that night, and now someone is sitting outside your home. We should be careful." Marian's fingers drifted toward the envelope almost without meaning to. The tiny star in the corner suddenly felt heavier than paper should allow. But why bring back something I barely talked about with anyone? Why now? Kaylin hesitated, thinking quietly before answering. Maybe someone remembers more than we realized. Maybe that night meant something to someone else too. Marian shook her head. That night was just us. His eyes softened. It was more than that, Marian. You don't give yourself enough credit. You leave impressions without noticing. Someone might have seen something, or overheard something, or held on to something you forgot. The thought lingering between them was both comforting and unsettling. A sudden gust of wind hit the porch, rattling a loose chime Marian had hung years ago. The sound echoed through the living room, sharp and unexpected. She flinched. Kaylin gently touched her forearm, not a grab, not a pull, just a quiet reassurance. It's okay, I'm here. His voice was calm, steady, grounding in a way she didn't realize she still needed. Marian drew a slow breath. I should have asked earlier, what exactly did you mean when you said you never forgot the things I told you? Not just the journal, but everything. Kaylin looked down, as if searching for the right way to shape his words. When I left town, I took pieces of you with me. Not on purpose, not out of obsession, but because they wouldn't let go. The way you talked about your dreams, the way you listened when I said things no one else cared about, the way you wished on a night sky like you believed it might actually hear you. Her chest tightened. Kaylin, I know it doesn't make up for disappearing, he said softly, but I carried those things with me. I remembered them, even when I thought I shouldn't. Marian's eyes glistened, though she blinked the warmth away gently. All this time, I thought you forgot everything the moment you left. He shook his head. I didn't forget. I was just too afraid to come back. A quiet stillness filled the room. Heavy, but meaningful, like a doorway opening to a truth neither of them had spoken aloud before. Marian felt a complicated ache forming in her chest, a mixture of relief, hurt, and old memories stepping back into the light. But before she could respond, a faint crunch echoed from outside, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on wet gravel. Marian froze. Kaylin's posture sharpened instantly. The footsteps moved slowly, carefully, toward the front porch. Marian's voice trembled. Kaylin, someone's walking up. He glanced toward the door, expression firm but calm. Stay behind me. But neither of them moved an inch closer. The fear wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet tension tightening the air. A shadow passed by the window, tall, still, waiting. Then came a soft knock. Not Kaylin's rhythm, not the earlier urgent one, a new one, slow, steady, almost familiar. Marian's breath hitched. I know that knock, she whispered. Kaylin turned to her, eyes widening. You do? She nodded, barely able to speak. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her fingertips. It's from someone I haven't seen in years. She didn't say a name, but Kaylin heard the fear and recognition in her voice. And the knock came again, more patient this time, as if whoever stood outside knew she was listening. The knock lingered in the silence, steady and calm, as if the person outside knew exactly how to reach into old memories she had long tried to tuck away. Marian felt the room shift around her, the air thickening with recognition she wished she didn't feel. Kaylin looked at her gently. Marian, who is it? She swallowed hard, clasping her hands together as if steadiness could be summoned through sheer will. There was someone else who knew about that night, she whispered, but only because they were there before we were. Kaylin's brows pulled together. Before us? She nodded slowly. At the lake, on the far dock, a few minutes before you arrived. Her voice dropped, thick with memory. I didn't know they heard the wish I made until later." Kalen didn't speak at first, but his expression softened with understanding. "Then you think—" Another knock. The same slow rhythm. Certain. Patient. Maureen stepped back, breath shivering in her throat. "Kalen, I don't know if I'm ready to see him." "Him?" Kalen repeated gently. She nodded, eyes drifting toward the door. "His name is Eris. We were friends for a short time when we were younger. He knew me during one of the loneliest seasons of my life. But he left suddenly, without a word, just like you." Her voice trembled on the last phrase, though she didn't direct it at him. It was simply the truth of her past, people leaving before she could understand why. Kalen exhaled, quiet and thoughtful. "Do you want me to stay or give you space?" "I want you here," she whispered instantly. He nodded once, steady and sure. "Then I'm not going anywhere." Maureen took a breath that trembled through her entire body, then walked toward the door. She hesitated only a moment before unlocking it. The soft click echoed like a memory opening. When she pulled the door open, the porch light steadied, almost as if it recognized the figure standing beneath it. Eris stood there, rain-touched and calm, holding nothing but the faint remnants of the mist clinging to his coat. His hair was longer, his build slightly broader, but his eyes, those hadn't changed. They still held the same quiet way of seeing through things, not around them. "Marian," he said softly. Her heart squeezed painfully at the sound of her name in his voice. "Eris, I didn't expect you." He offered a small, regretful smile. "I know, I shouldn't have come without warning, but when I found something that belonged to you, I thought maybe it was time." She blinked. "You sent the envelope?" He nodded. "Yes." Kalen stepped beside her, not in confrontation, but in gentle presence. Eris noticed him and offered a polite nod. "Kalen," he said quietly, "I remember you." Kalen nodded back. "It's been a long time." Marian stepped forward slightly, holding the drawing. "Why now, Eris? Why bring this back after so many years?" He lifted his gaze, a deep sincerity settling into his expression. "Because you were the first person who ever shared a wish with me, even if you thought I didn't hear it." Her breath hitched. "I thought you left town to forget everything," she murmured. "I left because I didn't know how to stay," Eris admitted, voice soft. "I was younger than you both, restless, unsure of myself. And that night, hearing your wish, it stayed with me for years. I didn't know how to carry it, so I ran from it instead." Marian's voice softened. "My wish scared you?" "It humbled me," Eris said. "You wished not to be forgotten, and I was terrified I didn't deserve to be someone who remembered." Kalen took a gentle step forward. "But you remembered anyway." Eris nodded. "Every day. I found that drawing tucked inside an old sketchbook last week, and suddenly I knew it was time to come back. Not for answers, just to return something that never belonged to me." Maureen stared at the drawing, then at Eris, then at Kalen, two people who had known her at different times, and who had both carried pieces of her without her knowing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Eris smiled faintly. "You don't need to say anything. I just needed to tell you the truth so you could finally close that chapter." He stepped back, rain brushing lightly across his shoulders. "You were never someone who disappeared, Maureen. Not from me, not from anyone." Her eyes warmed despite the cold air drifting in from the porch. Kalen stood close beside her, voice steady. "He's right." She turned toward him, and the look he gave her carried something deeper than memory, something present, real, and steady. Eris stepped down the porch, leaving space for the moment unfolding between them. "I'm glad you're not alone tonight," he said gently. Maureen felt her heart steady. "Thank you, Eris." He nodded once more, then walked toward his car. He didn't linger, didn't watch them from a distance, didn't try to reopen old doors. He simply left with a quiet grace that finally felt like closure. When the sound of his engine faded, Maureen closed the door softly and leaned back against it, exhaling a long breath she felt she'd been holding for years. Kaylin watched her with a tenderness that warmed the room. "You okay?" She nodded, stepping closer. "I think, for the first time in a long while, I'm finally beginning to be." Kaylin smiled, a small, heartfelt smile that softened every line of his face. "Good, because there's one more thing I haven't said yet." Maureen's heart lifted. "What's that?" He met her eyes, steady and warm. "I didn't come back just to return your journal. I came back because I realized something I should have understood years ago." Her breath slowed. "Kaylin, I remember the small things about you," he said softly, "because they're the things I've missed every day since I left." A gentle warmth spread through her chest, steady, certain, and full of hope. The night fell quiet around them. No knocks, no shadows. Just two people standing in the soft glow of a moment they had both been moving toward for years. And for the first time, the past didn't feel heavy anymore. It simply felt like the beginning of something new.